Hello everyone. This video is our second lecture in PSY 644. It is talking about family systems and characteristics of the family system. I've asked many questions, I think quite a few, which are personal to you, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to answer them to yourself. And if they come up in class, that we can discuss freely. So please watch the video, make any comments you may have on the video, ask your questions anywhere in any of the platforms where we are communicating, e-learning platform, WhatsApp platform. You could even text if you have questions, but mostly bring them up in class because others may benefit from the questions you might have. So I welcome you to watch the video and hope to see you soon. Thanks. Okay, welcome to lecture 2 in this course. Today we are going to learn about the general systems theory. Essentially, before this systems theory came into play, therapy was an individual matter. It was one client, one therapist. And so there was a revolution that changed this, and it is the general systems theory. That is one. The other one that basically was set against the background of the general systems theory is the Bowenian systems theory, which we shall look at in detail as one of the classes. So what happened in the late 60s, a gentleman called Ludwig von Battalanffys. I don't propose to keep saying that, but I'll just call him Ludwig. He came up with this general systems theory, which argued that a variety of human experiences, social and scientific problems could be thought of as if they were systems. So we are departing from this is an individual with his problems to this individual is part of a system. And I think I'm going ahead of myself. So this general systems theory took its thought from different types of thinkings, if I may put it that way. Much more thought than just one discipline brought up this theory. Now, from the point of view of physicists, people who study physics, they cannot understand atomic processes by taking one atom and studying it, and then another atom and studying it. What they do is they study how atoms behave together in a system. It's important to understand each atom separately, but the story does not end there. So this is part of the thinking that started happening in the late 60s. And it was a huge breakthrough, or rather a groundbreaking way of thinking, not a breakthrough, but a groundbreaking way of thinking that things actually are a system. Things are not by themselves. The atoms cannot be fully functional by themselves. Each plays a role, in the whole scheme of things, which is what got to be called a system, systemic way of thinking. According to Ludwig, many problems individuals encounter in their lives are not just individual pathologies. It's not just about me. It's about me my pathologies are occurring in me as part of a system. Ludwig was actually not talking about families and therapy. He was actually not a psychologist. Your homework, find out what he was. He was a scientist, but not a psychologist. But when psychologists started listening to him, he started making a lot of sense. So Bowen we will study a bit later, but when psychologists heard this, they started saying, well then, isn't a family a system of individuals? Seen the other way is this individual that I had said earlier has come for therapy, but they are part of a system. And so the idea of family systems, remember even the title of our course is Family Systems and Marital Therapy. So systems, the idea of the family being a system started being born from Ludwig's scientific ideas. So a system came to be described as, for now we take it for granted because we've known this for a long time, but at that time it was shocking, shockingly new information. Just the way the other day I learned that the coronavirus is responsible for 97% of the homas that we get, of the flus that we get. That shocked me because I thought corona is a new thing. What is now the big thing, what is now emerging is COVID-19, a coronavirus that has different characteristics from other corona. Maybe not a very relevant example. I just wanted to show that this idea of things being systems emerged with, this, huge impact. And so a system is a set of interacting units or components that together form the whole arrangement. The parts that form the whole arrangement are called subsystems. Therefore, a family is a system with various components which are called subsystems. So the components to a system, the subsystem components, each have their own individual characteristics, its own autonomous functions, and they have a specific role they play into a system. So families are a system in themselves, but then embedded in a bigger system called society. So families, individual families are made of individuals, but individual families form the bigger ecosystem. And that's why we say the family is the building block of society. So if you think of the big system, the bigger system, the society or the community, the various subsystems, the components of that big system are things like race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, level of education, financial security. All these are things that, are the interlocking parts of the wider society. But as you've listened to me mention them, do you see that they could also be components within the small family system? So this was new thinking, seeing the family. I don't know why I always think a system is circular. I don't know what you people think. I don't know whether they are rectangular system. But in my head, a system is always a circle, and I don't have to be correct about that. But the characteristics of a system, so you'll see me doing this all the time because I think it's a circle. But the characteristics of a system are that one, it has interrelated elements and structure. I mean, they're all interrelated. If you think of, yeah. In a family system, the elements of this system are the family members, and each element has its own characteristics. Now, this is an obvious thing to state that there are relationships. In the interlocking, there are relationships between the elements and they function in an interdependent manner. So because of, I mean, all these elements, all these characteristics that we've mentioned form or create the system. And as you can imagine, I don't know, as you are listening to me saying it is circular, you can also see, even as they interlock, there are boundaries in the interlocking parts. So again, that's another feature of a system. Although the elements are present, they're interrelated, they are interlocking, they're interdependent, there are also boundaries. And in this theory of family systems, and even when we come to the Bowenian, you will hear a lot about boundaries. Okay, let's now go ahead and look at characteristics of a family system. The first characteristic is organization and wholeness. And to understand the family, therefore, it is necessary to look at it in its entirety. Don't look at just one of the parts and think you've understood the family. This is part of why we do the genogram, because we want to see how has a system been for time, through time. Forgive me, English is not my first language, so sometimes I think in mother tongue and then I translate, but yeah. So because of what we have said, the system relates with it. I mean, the components of the system interlock, interrelate. We need to see the entire system. So when we are taking history, that's why it's very important that we hear, how are relationships among the grandparents, among the parents, and then how are they reflecting here. So there's this saying that no, I think I haven't. Yeah, the system is more than the sum of its parts. I think that was one of Ludwig's, I was about to say descendants, I mean disciples, academic disciples who came up with that phrase. So you can see, if you think of yourself, you're a part of your family. But if you think of the wider family, your extended family, your family of origin and the extended family, you might be able to see certain characteristics, certain patterns, certain things that explain who you are today. And that's the purpose of the genogram assignment. So the parts in the family are, they operate together. Nobody actually woke up and said this family will operate like this, and we will come back to other characteristics that help us understand that. But the family is organized in a particular way. That particular way of organizing may actually be, if you look at it as an outsider looking in, you might say, gosh, how do these people even, how do they even survive? How do they operate? But the reality is there is a system and it's organized in a particular way, even if the organization is disorganized. So that's organization in itself. So some families you will see they're organized around the patriarch, others are organized around the matriarch. And I have vivid examples of this. I have a client who um, is in his 50s, and he comes from a family of 7 brothers and 2 sisters. So the brothers are very powerful. They are very strong and coordinated. Actually, he's really struggling with schizophrenia, and the brothers are really gathering around him and supporting him. So we got talking at some point, and he tells me, my father is one of these rich Kikuyu old men. It's a concept, it's a thing, it's a system by itself. What these old rich Kikuyu fathers, what they do, they control the money in the family, and they make everybody rely on them, so that for every of your needs you have to ask him. He is the patriarch, and everybody has to bow before him. And I've had, even from when I practiced law, I had a lot of these families where the father is such a strong figure. He's not letting anything go. His children in their adulthood and in their in their middle adulthood, my client is in his 50s, they have to say, Dad, I'd like some money to pay school fees for my daughter. Dad, I don't have fuel. Hey, Dad, now my clothes are too big. Give me some money to go and buy clothes. And I have experienced this family. So my client was telling me, now I don't even know how to pay you because I'm waiting for Dad to send me money on M-Pesa so that I can pay you. A very strong patriarch. I also know of a family that is organized around the mother. Sometimes the mother is widowed, or sometimes the father is there but he's weak. He's a weak person. So the mother determines everything about that family, including for her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren if she lives to see them. So I know of this family where every decision is made at the dining table of the matriarch. Her fifth born has 5 children, and she has to be involved in the decision of where the children are going to kindergarten, which primary school will they then go, which high school, why are they not in school. She's involved in the lives of their children, and they fear and tremble at her sight. So that's an organization. You may not like it, you may not admire it, but it's an organization. So number 2, characteristics of the family system. We observe the family interaction patterns. Families interact in patterns. Patterns are predictable ways of interacting, and this help the family maintain its equilibrium. And they give you, when you observe those patterns, they give you clues about what is wrong, what can be done to help them function. So again, when you're interacting with a family, you are looking out for its patterns. How do they, who like when the father starts to speak, who else, who is able to oppose what the father is saying, who acquiesces, who disagrees and keeps quiet. So that's an element of the family communication pattern. So there are many other patterns, including things like, this is Dad's seat and nobody should sit there. Oh, that reminds me, when we were growing up, whenever we would slaughter a chicken, my dad was preserved for the breast, the chicken breast. And I grew up knowing the chicken breast is a sacred piece of meat. Nobody should eat it. So when I grew up and I was able to afford my own chicken, man, did I buy and eat and consume and revel in chicken breast, only for me to realize, I think I prefer the leg. You know, I mean, I think the leg is, obviously they say that the breast is healthier, but the leg for me is the sweetest part. That was a family interaction pattern. So, so you can see some patterns are unsaid, some patterns just occur because they come from previous generations. Some patterns are decided upon. In this family, this is what we do. So you have to, as a family therapist, you're listening for hidden patterns, obvious patterns, purposeful patterns, readily agreed patterns, and conscious patterns, etc., etc. One example that I have given in the notes is who speaks first. When the family comes together, which uncle does everybody look like, expecting them to start talking? You know, that's an established pattern. So number 3, we have family rules. These are characteristics of a family system. Each family has its own rules, whether said, again, whether said or not said. Now, I have just remembered as I say this, I don't know whether to call it a rule, but in our family, I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. In our family, immediately dad arrived, each person, each of my 6 siblings, we were 7, each of us knew when he arrives, what stands do you want to be found at? Some of us would be found in the pantry, looking like we are coming to fetch something to come and cook. Others knew their space is to be found, clearing the table room, making it tidy. My stance was, I was to be found with my head over a book. I was the reading one. So immediately we had the gate, grrr, I would run to the table and open a book. And everybody else had that. That may not be a rule, maybe rituals, but you see, it was emanating from a rule. My dad hated idleness. He hated indolence. He hated, aimlessness. Okay? So the rule was, you must be seen. In this family, we work. Everybody works. So we had to find a stance which says, I'm working. Another one would run out with a kebe of water to go and feed the chicken. So if he finds everybody is working, he will not have too much to say. That's why whenever he came, even at 2 a.m. and found everyone sleeping, he would start shouting, "You lazy people, why are you sleeping?" And for that matter, I'm a very light sleeper, because you could not afford to be found sleeping. Irregardless, that's Uhuru's word, regardless of whether it is nighttime, dawn, or dusk, you have to be found working. So family rules are either verbally communicated, or is the word induce or deduce? You induce them. If you are beaten for sleeping too early, then you know the rule in this family is you cannot sleep early. Okay, so some messages are communicated very non-verbally. But family rules, again, are what holds the family in equilibrium. The family keeps operating. So sometimes the rule may be unspoken and it may not be known, But when you compare it with yet another system, it becomes very clear. Let me give you another example from my dysfunctional family. My father never wanted people to visit, never wanted us to visit our relatives. He had this belief that whenever people visit, say, their auntie or their uncle, they get spoiled. And this came from a situation where his sister had visited an aunt and she came back pregnant. So he always imagined, and we are a family of 5 girls to start with, and then 2 boys. He always imagined if we visited, we might come back pregnant. So he didn't want us to visit. I had an auntie who I really enjoyed visiting her place because she would just spoil me rotten because I was named after her mom. So I really liked visiting her, and my cousins would come to visit us, and then we beg for permission for me to go with them. Um, when I would be at my auntie's home, I would just see a totally different environment. From her house, we visited so many of their friends, so many of their friends would come to visit them, and I saw a place where the rules were, if you visit, you must come back by a certain time. The rules in my house really now stood out. You will not, thou shalt not visit anyone. Of course, that has resulted in me again being a very, sort of withdrawn person. I mean, not sociable, not very, very sociable. So if you are to give me therapy, you'd really, really need to take note of why don't I have so many social ties. It began from there. But when you hear rules in other people's houses, it really, the contrast makes the rules in your house come out, and you can think about that about your own. So in the notes I have described more about the rules. They are repetitive. Um, they are rarely ever written down. They give power. They induce guilt because if you break them, then you're in trouble. They limit, control your behavior. They determine how you behave. Rules perpetuate themselves because they are reinforced in the environment. Once you break a rule, you're punished. If you don't break a rule, you keep it, you're rewarded. Even if not directly, you won't get into trouble. So that's how rules perpetuate themselves. Another point about rules is that they can be restrictive. They're either restrictive or appropriate. And of course, rules change as family members change, maybe in age, in status, at one point you have people in the family who are students, then they stop being students, that status changes, and therefore the rules change. And remember, they are not necessarily written, so the rules now have to change. For example, I've been doing my master's, now I've graduated, I've gotten a job, so you can't always find me at home. Now I have a job. I don't know whether this is making sense, but all these are characteristics of family rules. So we okay, we are looking at the characteristics of a family system, and we're on the fourth one, subsystem. So every family system contains a small group of a number of small groups within the system, usually made up of 2 or 3 systems. Usually we talk about the parents having their own subsystem, which we call the parent subsystem, and the siblings forming coalitions, who gets along best with who is wanting to do what with who does it. So in each family there are those little groupings, also known as coalitions or alliances. Specifically, when we refer to them as alliances, is where we have people from maybe a smaller, non-consequential, like, you know, the sibling relationship between two sisters may be considered a weak coalition, and then it joins the parental subsystem, a weak subsystem joining a strong subsystem, and we call that an alliance. And I'd ask you to reflect back to your families, um, where you come from. Think about which subsystem do you belong to. Have you ever formed an alliance with any other subsystem? That is basically how families work. Now, within each subsystem, there are rules and there are ways of engaging, there are patterns of engaging, there are boundaries, and these are not fixed in stone. There are many families where these subsystems change as the family changes. For example, when parents grow very old, you will find there are some who are keen on taking care of the parents, some who have said, we are the older ones, we've taken care of these parents when the other children were small, let them now take over taking care of the parents. So you find, again, alliances changing. The fifth component is boundaries, and these are the lines that demarcate who is in and who is out of the system. So it tells you who are the outsiders. When people say, we in our family do this, and somebody else coming in cannot relate with that, that's a boundary. Boundaries can be physical. You can live in a different geographical location, and that demarcates you as an independent family system. Or they may be symbolic. You could say, we relate better with the people from my mother's side. So our boundaries there are a bit more permeable than the ones on my father's side. So we can describe boundaries in terms of permeability, as I have mentioned. And this is the degree to which people can come in and out easily. And are these open boundaries? Are they easily permeable, or they are very tight and rigid? We can also talk about ambiguity of a boundary. And it is not clear. This is what it's not clear who is in and who is out. It's an ambiguous boundary. You don't know, for example, your subsystem. Is this one with us or not with us? Is this one with the family subsystem or with us? So you can have boundaries like that that are not able to be clearly defined. There are certain ways the family systems theory describes boundaries. We can have an open boundary. This means that it is easily permeable, and the boundaries are not so strong, therefore it is considered open. We can also have a closed boundary where a family is so segregated, doesn't allow outsiders in easily, is very choosy about who is allowed in. These are closed family system. And at any given time, the family does not exist from beginning to end with one type. As people in the family change, the boundaries change from time to time. But if you look at them at a particular season, you're able to say, at this time, this family looks open or closed boundaries. The sixth characteristic is that families have narratives and a worldview. So, when you listen to majority of the members of the family, you are likely to hear a particular philosophy that they live by, whether or not they are aware of it. I have seen families which believe um, if you prosper, you must be in witchcraft. I have, I'm thinking now of specific family philosophies that I've heard. Or recently we visited an old man and we were talking about the cost of land in their surrounding, because they live in a very beautiful area that oversees or overlooks, or in which you can see, from which you can see the mountain very clearly, and says, oh, people have come, they've bought a lot of land, many people have come from elsewhere. So I said, so how much is land going for around here? Then he says 12 million. And I say, wow, then that means people are not buying. He says, no, people are buying. People who stole a long time ago are buying. And I laughed inside myself and I said, so this man believes that if you didn't steal, you can't have money. And later on, to interact with his adult children, and they were all like, imagine so and so must have stolen from somewhere because they have bought 6 acres near the mountain. That family believes unless you steal, you can't prosper. So others will believe the world is dangerous. If you're not wearing something here to protect you, you can easily be killed, or you can easily be, another family I know, they actually wear beads around their stomachs, because if you don't wear those beads to protect you, the world is so unsafe, you can be bewitched, you can, so think about your family and see whether you can hear a pervading belief or philosophy. That is your family narrative. Family rituals is the 7th one, and this is just how we do things here. These are the things we do, and this is how we do them. And I would like to ask you to think up of what are some of your family rituals. As I had mentioned earlier, one of the rituals in our family was that my dad gets the best part of the chicken. Where I got married, I found a very, very unfair ritual, and I have really been fighting it. I found that when you're slaughtering a goat for a certain event, obviously it is the men who do the slaughtering. But I found there is a certain awe and respect for these slaughterers, that they would, they would roast the meat, start eating. The rest of us are just swallowing the smell. What is a good food smell called? The scent. No, scent is, what is it called? The aroma. We are swallowing the aroma. We are swallowing the smoke that is carrying the smell of roasted meat to us, but then they are actually eating. And they got away with it. And in some instances, they would even eat half the meat. And the women would be like, us, we can just eat the rice. We can just eat the vegetables. It is the men who eat the meat. And I've been fighting that ever since I got married there. I normally take myself to where the slaughtering is done. And I find them chopping the meat and I say, hey, give me some. So those are some of family rituals. They're just accepted and people do them without even being reminded. The 8th one is family myths. These are part of the ideology, pervasive ideology of the family that revolves around the rituals, the roles, and the rules. For example, as you're taking the client's history and you want to hear what are the myths, you can say something like, in crisis, we as a family, this is what we do. People will tell you. Or, by being close in this family, we mean that In some families, you can hear we are in every birthday celebration. We are together every Christmas. We invest together. You will hear the family pervasive ideology. Um, so think about your own family. What is how do people define some of these characteristics? And then finally, family roles. In each family, as an outsider looking in or listening in, you will hear each member of the family is regarded in a certain way, and there's a certain role in which they fit. And I will give you the example. So the question is, who plays what role in the family? Some of the most common roles are the identified patient, and this is the person everybody says, this is the black sheep of our family. Huyu ndio mwana mpotevu. This is a person most likely who will come for therapy. And then when you, using the family systems approach, you want to hear the rest of the family, and you will hear this person is behaving like this because the family system is sick. And so they are the identity. The whole family should be a patient, but this is the identified one. We also hear of the parentified child. This is the child who is either positioned by the parents as the assistant parent. You're the oldest. Give a good example to the rest. We are leaving you in charge of your brothers and sisters. They become parentified. Then we have the caretaker who believes in taking care of everybody's problems. We have the baby. They may actually not be the last born, but the person who is so needy, everybody regards them as the baby of the family. We may have the black sheep. We may have the angel, the one who never does wrong, a very compliant child, or, a very compliant parent, the distractor, the victim, the incompetent one, the competent one. And if you read on this, you will see so many other roles. All these people define each other in their minds, or there's a family agreement. This is just our baby. We have to pay his rent. He may be the third born out of 7, but we have to pay his rent. We have to buy his food. Everybody coalesces around a family member, giving them a particular role. And roles are fine when they help the person and they help the system to function well and do not prevent a person from growing. But the converse is true. If you allocate roles that are unfair, unjustified, the person begins to feel uncomfortable in the presence of the family, and may lead to what we will see in Bowen called emotional cut-off, or even physical cut-off. A person leaving the family because they've been completely misunderstood. And sometimes in therapy, I'm actually having a client in one of those matriarchal families that I had given an example of. And because of some circumstances that happened in the family, she's regarded as the black sheep of the family. And I have done quite a bit of due diligence in this case. I've spoken to her uncles, I've spoken to her cousins, some who live here, others who live abroad, just to try and understand, why is she the black sheep? And to my grief, I have discovered she's been mislabeled. And actually her ambition in life is to leave this family completely cut off for about 5 years or 10 years, and then come back when she's stronger, because she's been falsely accused. The children, the grandchildren to this matriarch know that she's been falsely accused, she's been misunderstood, she's been labeled the black sheep of the family. That label is not working well. Before the label came, she was the exemplary child. Everybody, all the cousins were being told, you must be like so and so. Look at how she's responsible. Look at how she's. And that was working for the family because the younger children wanted to emulate her. The grown ups could be at peace when she was left in charge. But due to some unfortunate circumstances in which she's innocent, but they saw it negatively, she's been branded the black sheep. And actually, in the course of this week, I have a meeting with the matriarch and I want to help her see the damage they have done to this girl psychologically. And because she's a mover and the shaker of her family, I'm hoping to use her as a change agent to help the adults in the family see they have completely misunderstood. So as a family therapist, this is something very important to listen for. What is the label in for each member of the family? And part of therapy is just really to find evidence for those labels, help the family see, yeah, we've correctly labeled this one, this is the benefit we are deriving from this, but we have mislabeled this one, and this is the disadvantage we are suffering, and can we do the work of, undoing the whole thing and creating a healthy label. Right, so that brings us to the end of this understanding of family as a system, and some of the classic theories that we'll be looking at in this course coalesce around that that groundbreaking perception or perspective that the family is a system. If you want the individual to be well, treat the entire system. Thank you very much.